Welcome to this amazing interview with Ken Blanchard and Randy Conley. I'm Dana Theus with Empower Coaching, and we're here to celebrate the publication of their new book. I get it in frame, Simple Truths of Leadership, 52 Ways to be a Servant Leader and Build Trust. And I just have to say that I really enjoyed this book. It was extremely accessible. I mean, talk about taking so much wisdom and really condensing it into something that's very applicable and very understandable to everybody. And for those who don't know, who I can't imagine who that would be, Ken Blanchard is the author of The 1 Minute Manager and many other books, and runs the Ken Blanchard Companies, where Randy is the vice president of the trust practice, which Randy, I want to get to understanding a trust practice. That just sounds amazing by itself. And I wanted to get us going through the lens of the historically underrepresented leader, by which I mean people of color, openly LGBTQ, women who are still underrepresented in leadership positions. Because a lot of this wisdom is needed by everybody. It works for everybody. But some aspects of it are challenging in a different way for the people who experience a lot of unconscious bias. And in particular, I wanted to dive into the idea of servant leadership, Ken, in terms of how it relates to positional power. Because as I understand servant leadership, it in many ways is the choice not to exercise or not to over-exercise, certainly not to abuse positional power, and to choose instead to provide direction and step back and support your team, give them what they need, give them the resources, the feedback, the support, et cetera. And many historically underrepresented leaders really want to be servant leaders. They see themselves as servant leaders. They know what it's like not to be respected or not to feel respected, and they don't want to do that to other people. And yet, it's easy to see how someone who enjoys a lot of positional power and the authority that they bring to that role is respected. When they walk into a room and choose not to use it, choose to be a servant leader instead, they get a lot of credit. People like that. They feel trusted. They give their loyalty. They give their extra effort. But there are some people, particularly those experiencing unconscious bias, who show up and their positional authority is not respected. They're undermined. They find a lot of efforts to be servant leaders kind of backfire on them because while a servant leader wants to show up with humility, that's expected from a lot of underrepresented leaders, and they don't get credit for that. As a matter of fact, it can be seen as yet another reason not to respect their authority. So I'm really interested in your thoughts about this, and in particular, how can someone be a servant leader when their positional authority and power is something they struggle to maintain or to get? Do they have to get that positional power first before they can be an effective servant leader?
Right. Well, Ken has a wonderful story. One of our simple truths, number 14, I think it is the best use of power is in service to others. And Ken, that was modeled for him very early in his life by his father. So Ken, you want to share that story of when you were elected student body president?
I was actually the president of the 7th grade. I grew up in New Rochelle, New York. Interesting upbringing because I went to a predominantly Jewish elementary school, and we merged with a predominantly Black junior elementary school into junior high school. And I was the compromise candidate, won all the elections. And I was elected the president of 7th grade. So I come home, I'm all pumped up. My dad, who retired later as a rear admiral in the Navy, say, Ken, now that you're president, your leadership training begins. Don't ever use your position as a leader. Recognize that it's all about working with your people and making a difference for them. It's not about you, basically, he was saying. And he said, if it's a myth in the military, it's my way to the highway. It's sure in battle, somebody's going to call the shots. But if you act like a big deal over your people, in the long run, they'll shoot you before the enemy.
Well, my daughter-in-law is actually commanding a cavalry company. She's the most senior woman in that position in her post. And when I asked her about this, she agreed with you. She said that, positional power it gets you in the door, but it's not what, makes people want to follow you. That said, she says she does have to show up with a different sense of humor, a different way of being with her troops than her male counterparts.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if in your 7th grade experience or any other experience, and we have to acknowledge we're 3 white people talking about this, and I can speak
Right.
to the women's experience, and I'd invite people online to, go into Q&A and ask some questions and share with us your experience. But, if you don't have that positional authority for whatever reason, if it could be just the culture of the organization that they go around leaders all the time and they don't respect authority, how do you establish effective servant leadership when your positional power is not something you can rely on?
Right. I think there's no denying the challenge of it, and for any of us to suppose that there's quick and easy answers, that's just not reality, right? There are a lot of complex dynamics at play. A central theme that I see running through both servant leadership and the effective use of power is being of service to others and being an advocate for others. And what that looks like in the workplace is when you as a leader are doing whatever you can to help your people become the full expression of themselves, sort of blossoming with all the natural gifts and abilities and traits that they bring to the workplace. I think we have to keep battling that myth that people are just sort of, widgets that show up to do a job, right? I mean, we're bringing our whole selves to the workplace, our backgrounds, our histories, that are coming with us. And I think if servant leaders or leaders who want to be more of service, if they keep that focus that my goal is to help people become the full expression of who they are, then at least we're heading in the right direction. And position power is just one form of power. There's other forms of power that we can all rely upon to help us influence others. So, we've got relationship power with other people in the organization. We've got task power. Maybe we control a certain task or one of the few people that can do a certain thing. We've got knowledge power. Maybe we have a certain expertise that others don't have. And so I think leveraging other points of power can help mitigate maybe if we don't come in with that positional power, or we don't want to use position power in a heavy-handed way to gain influence.
The big thing, Dan, is a philosophy of it's about we, not me, and that 1 + 1 is a lot greater than 2. And I love that people say that there's no I in team, because what you're trying to do is create a great team, and it's not about you. And so often in organizations, and the reason people are leaving, they say 65, 70% of the workforce are dissatisfied with their work environment. That's because they don't feel like they can contribute, that everybody's sucking up the hierarchy, where a servant leader says it's not about the hierarchy, it's about us together. And I want you to be able to share what you know and help and give me feedback. And I'm going to admit when I'm wrong or I make a mistake, and I want you to be the same. And so it's just a whole different philosophy.
It is. And, in my experience, it definitely works. Although a couple of things you mentioned, I wanted to bring up too, because I think they're related to this whole issue of, in a lot of ways, we're talking about, how to gain respect as a leader. And so people want to follow with you, right?
Yeah.
And you bring up a couple of your simple truths, which I like about, don't be afraid to toot your own horn. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable and share some vulnerability. And somewhat like servant leadership, for some people in some situations, this can actually backfire on them. If you toot your own horn and then you're told you're aggressive and, you're too noisy and too much about yourself, right?
Yeah.
Or you're trying to be vulnerable and people just see you as weak, right? So there are some fine lines to walk there, kind of like with positional power. You can overdo it. On the other hand, sometimes those things don't work and you kind of have to balance it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have any advice for people who struggle with that balance, want to be vulnerable, but have been burned for being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Want to tune their own horn, but have been burned for it.
Yeah. What's the old saying? Discretion is the better part of valor. Sometimes
Yes.
you have to discern and decide, what are the battles worth fighting and winning, versus retreating and coming back for another day,
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I have found helpful in guiding me, and it relates to one of our other simple truths, is tell the truth always. It really is that simple. Do the right thing. And sometimes there is a cost to that. I think any leader of any tenure has probably experienced a negative cost for doing the right thing. And that doesn't negate the fact that it is the right thing to do, and being able to sleep comfortably at night because you know that you're a person of integrity and you're doing the right thing. And that's not always well received in organizations, particularly those that have toxic cultures or environments. But I found that as long as I'm focused on others, serving others, trying to do what's best for them, to advocate for them, that there's this, sort of universal, whether you call it karma or, whatever. I think the more good that you try to do, the more comes back to you, in due time. So that's been helpful for me. Focus on doing the right thing and feel confident and secure that at least as far as you're concerned, you're doing what's right.
One of my favorite sayings, Dana, is when in doubt, confront, and when all else fails, try honesty. And,
I like that.
Be genuine with your people that we're in this thing together. It's not about me, it's about we. And about tooting your own horn, I think it really means that when the team does well, saying that I'm really proud to be a part of this team and having a chance to lead this team. It's not sort of saying, look at me, these other folks are idiots. I did all the work. No, I'm glad to be part of this team. And makes a difference.
And there's also a difference when you say that and really mean it.
Mm-hmm.
People know that, right? I mean, it's when you say it and you think you're I'm supposed to say this. A lot of the times they actually hear the opposite because you're not being real and you're not being vulnerable.
Right.
And I think it's on like page 1, maybe, of the book. You talk about how we get into kind of an either or mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I either have to be in charge and I'm the one that does everything, or else everybody else gets the credit. And it's really the both and, because I think a lot of the things that we're talking about, any one of these simple truths by itself isn't the answer, right? It's all of them and balancing them and finding the right time and place and way, genuinely and authentically, to be that way.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I have to believe that that any one of these things isn't the solution by itself.
Right. And whether it's these simple truths or any leadership model or coaching approach or, whatever, anything taken in isolation and taken to an extreme, ceases to become helpful, right? I mean, we get off track when we do that. And it really is the power of the and. We emphasize that in our simple truth that says trusted servant leaders understand it's about both relationships and results, because one of the common myths of servant leadership is that, oh, it's this nice, warm, fuzzy, do good to everyone, be nice, let's all hold hands, and that's not the truth. The reality is servant leaders understand that there are results are important. We have to achieve the outcomes, the goals that we're striving for as an organization, and the power of the and. You do that through relationships with the people that you're leading, and they both go together. It's not an either or. So whether we're talking, diversity, equity, inclusion strategies or leadership strategies or whatever it is, it's the whole ball of wax. They all work together, right? We can't take one little thing in isolation and think that that's going to be the silver bullet that does it for us.
And when I mention servant leadership to people, a lot of times they think I'm talking about the inmates running the prison or trying to please everybody or some kind of religious group. And they don't understand there's two parts of servant leadership. There's the leadership part, which is about vision, direction, values, and goals, because leadership's about going somewhere. And that's the responsibility of the hierarchy. It doesn't mean that you don't involve your people. But if people aren't clear what they're being asked to do, what good behavior looks like, and what the values drive their behavior, shame on you. It's your responsibility. Once the leadership part of servant leadership is clear, now you turn the pyramid upside down, and now you get to the servant part of servant leadership. And now your job is to help your people live according to the vision, the values, and accomplish the goals. And so it's as Randy likes to say, it's a both and, and tell them how you put those three words up, Randy. I always think that's a good one.
Yeah. Oftentimes, Dana, when I'm working with groups, I'll put on a flip chart 3 words: results and relationships. And I'll say, what's the most important word up here? And they'll discuss it at their tables, and inevitably half the group says, results are the most important. It's scoreboard, baby. That's why we're here, right? We want to win. And then the other half of the group says, well, I think relationships are the most important, right? Because it's the people that achieve the results. And there's always a few, discerning people in the crowd that says, well, I think maybe the word and is the most important, right? And I'm like, bingo, that's it. It's the power of the and, and it's what we've been talking about. Servant leaders understand that the primary role of a leader is to bring out the best in their people, right? I love athletics because it's such a great metaphor for leadership, right? The coach isn't the one on the field playing the game. The players play the game, but the coach helps teach, they help set up the structure, they help set up the game plan, and then they let people go do what they do best, And I think if more of us in corporate life can embrace that it's about the team, it's not about me, it's about the team. Let me help them be successful. Then I think we're making progress.
So this may be an overextension of that analogy, but one of the things, and I don't remember seeing it in the book, but I certainly find it to be very important, is part of supporting your team is running interference for them, which is hard to do from the sidelines, but you can yell at the referee, right?
Yep.
But there are times where they need roadblocks removed. They need you to go to bat for them with the CEO. They need you to take on, those really tough customers. And that's when your positional authority comes in really handy, right? Absolutely, it's not just setting the vision. You're in there helping clear blocks that you can clear, that they struggle more with. And I think that's something that some leaders forget, that's their job. And it can be really important. I don't know if this is a direct relationship, but Randy, I wanted you to talk a little bit about trust in the business context, because it's not possible to always have everyone's back, right? I mean, budgets have to get cut, hard decisions have to get made. And I wanted to understand your thoughts about trust in the workplace. Realistically, what is it realistically? And also, I love your distinctions in the book about trust, distrust, control, and change. Like that to me those are just brilliant.
Yeah. Well, it's more than a cliche, that trust is the foundation of any healthy, successful relationship, right? I mean, trust really is what makes our world go round in many regards, right? I mean, global commerce, it's all based on the expectation that I'm going to trust that whatever you're selling me or giving me, and I'm paying you for, is a fair exchange, right? I mean, it's the basis of how we interact as humans. And in the corporate world, I think first and foremost, leaders have to be the model. One of the simple truths we talk about is, in order for trust to begin to grow, someone has to make the first move. Someone has to first extend trust. And I believe it's the leader's role to extend trust. They don't get the privilege of saying, well, just because of my position or my title, you should trust me. I get your trust just because of my title. No, that's not the way it works. And so I think if leaders can be very intentional about building trust, and remember that trust is behaviorally based. We build or erode trust based on the behaviors we use. And so that makes us in control of whether we can build trust or not. It's not just some, relationship osmosis that organically happens over time. You can be very intentional about building trust.
Is this trust in the sense of integrity? I do what I say I'll do. You know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that's part of it. Most people, when they think of trust, integrity is sort of the first thing they go to. But research shows that there's really 4 distinct elements of trust in a relationship. The first is your competence. So, do you have the knowledge and skills to do what you're supposed to do? We like to call that able. Are you able as a leader? The second component is integrity. Are you a believable person? Can people trust what you say? The third element of trust is connection. Do you care about people? Do you build rapport? Do you have a benevolent attitude towards others? Do you have their best interests in mind? And then the fourth element of trust is dependable. Do you honor your commitments? Do you do what you say you're going to do? And there are behaviors that you can use that align with each of those 4 elements of trust that build trust with others. And so it's a very practical approach to building trust. And one of my favorite simple truths is the one that you mentioned. Distrust is not the opposite of trust. The opposite of trust is control. And people often say, that's interesting, Randy. Like, what's behind that? Well, for trust to even exist, there has to be some sort of risk involved, right? If there's no risk, that's a sure bet. That's a guarantee, right? We would take those odds in Vegas every day of the week. But trust requires risk. And in order for leaders to engage in risk, they have to let go of control, right? And we often see leaders who are uncomfortable with control. That's exhibited in the way they share information or communicate, right? It's like, sorry, Dana, you're on a need to know basis, right? And right now you don't need to know, so I'm not going to share any info with you. And they play their cards close to the vest. So whenever we start to see those controlling behaviors, either in ourselves or in others, we should think, what's going on with trust here? Why is that person, or why am I not willing to give up control? And it's usually because we're not willing to trust what's going to happen in a situation. So trust is just a beautiful multi-layered element in all of our relationships. But it goes back to you as the leader. Are you exhibiting trustworthy behavior?
And I think too, that circle, I love that. That's probably one of my favorite simple truths too. And I think it kind of goes back to something, Ken, you said about control. A lot of leaders get in their head that either I'm in control or they're in control. The inmates are running the prison or I am. And control, you can control some elements and not others. So as a leader, you have to control some elements but there are a lot you don't have to control. And those are the ones that, to your point, Randy, when you try to control them, people rebel because they're micromanaged. Their autonomy is taken away from them. And you had something else in there about change, that people don't resist change, they resist control. That is so true. If we could get rid of the people hate change,
Yes.
words and replace it with people hate control, I think we'd make a lot of progress.
Yeah. Oh, you're on mute, Ken.
Oops, you're on mute, Ken.
Ken, you muted yourself there. Oh.
My dog was barking. So but Dana, the biggest thing we have to control if we want to be a servant leader is our ego. We've kidded everything good outside, or, edging God out and somehow putting yourself in the center of the universe. And we do that in two ways. One is false pride, where you have a more than philosophy, I'm brighter than and all. And a lot of people don't think this is one of those things, but fear or self-doubt is when you have a less than, and that's an ego problem too. And the way you overcome false pride is with humility. And of course, a lot of people think that's a weakness, but I think it was C.S. Lewis or Rick Warren, or I even get some credit for saying people with humility don't think less of themselves. They just think about themselves less. So you can't be a servant leader if you don't feel comfortable with who you are, because you're going to be protecting, as Randy has been talking about. And the way you overcome fear of self-doubt is to recognize that God didn't make any junk. My mother always said to me, don't you act like you're better than anybody else, but don't you let anybody else act like they're better than you. There's a pearl of goodness in everyone. Dig for it. And so I've been a digger for a long time. And
I like that. And I think it's really true. Bringing us all the way back to the beginning about positional power is that, positional power may, get you a certain amount of credibility. But at the end of the day, it's that balance between too much ego or not thinking, not enough confidence in yourself, that if you strike it right, you can earn people's trust. You can earn the ability to be humble without having people take advantage of you. And that's kind of, to me, where that real balance comes in. Yeah. So thanks for bringing us back around, because we are technically done with the interview, and I'll ask people if they have any questions, observations, or experiences they want to share. But one more thing I wanted to say about the book is that so the subtitle is 52 Ways to be a Servant Leader and Build Trust. And I have to believe the number 52 was not an accident, because it occurred to me that as I was reading it cover to cover, and I thought that's really not the best way to read this. The best way to read this would really be to go in every week and pick one, because there's so many. I have a whole list as long as my arm that I loved. They just go in one each week and pick one and try living that, and try experimenting with that simple truth. I love this one. The best minute servant leaders spend is the one they invest in people. So, like, what minute have you spent today investing in people, right?
That's exactly right, Dana. It's no coincidence that there's 52. Well, we intentionally did that so that people could do just what you said, focus on one per week. And speaking of that simple truth, the best minute, is spent investing in your people. One of the great ways to gauge your priorities as a leader, look at your calendar, right? Look at your calendar over the last week or two. Look at how many instances you had one-on-one meetings with your team members versus, all the stuff we deal with every day, right? All the project meetings and strategy sessions and all that, which is all important. But how are you balancing that with spending time with your folks? Whether that's in a virtual environment, in structured meetings, or just popping in and checking in on people, either face-to-face or remotely. But the calendar is a great priority setter. I've been guilty looking back on that, thinking, man, my focus has been all over the place, where maybe I could zero in more on my people.
Zoom has been a powerful, positive thing coming out of the COVID, because now you can be in touch with your people without bringing them into the office and getting together. And so one of the things we say is that Peter Drucker told me years ago, nothing good happens by accident. Put some structure on it. And so we say to managers, you need to spend at least a one-on-one meeting for 15 to 30 minutes with each of your direct reports once every 2 weeks. So if you've had 26 meetings with your key people, my God, you'd know them and they'd know you. And so it takes time to be a servant leader.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I often think that was a big mistake I made early in my career. And I wish I'd had someone who gave me that advice, who said, no, part of your job is to spend time with your people.
Mhm.
I had to learn it the hard way. And I'm glad that, people like you are out there telling people like me, young me, that it's not only okay to spend time on these principles and personal reflection to help you understand yourself well enough to help other people.
Right.
That's part of the job.
I mean, how many times do we as leaders say, whew, I'm done with those meetings. Now I can do my real work, right?
Yes.
Now our real work is our people, right? That's our real work. So, we should be focused on that and think, yes, that's where I'm doing my best work, is when I'm spending time with my people. I'm coaching them, I'm listening, I'm supporting, encouraging, directing, whatever it may be. That's where the action is. It's not, oof, finally got them off my plate. Now I can sit here and, do my email.
And I guess that's the real benefit of servant leadership, which is, we have stories in our heads that says, if we're not controlling it, if we're not doing the work ourselves, we can't vouch for the quality, et cetera. But when you're effectively empowering everybody on the team, so much more can happen. So much better can happen, and you still play a role. And that's where some people, they get in their head that, well, now they don't need me. No, they need you. They need you to be supporting them. They need you to be guiding them. They need you to be giving them feedback, clearing roadblocks. There's a lot of things you need to be doing for them to be successful.
That's correct.
Well, thank you. Let's see. We do have a question here from Jasmine. How do you implement servant leader strategies when that doesn't align with your company culture? Yeah. Okay. Answer that one.
Well, I think what you need to do is take care of your own group the way you do. And hopefully when people start to look at the results that you're getting, because it's we rather than me, they're going to say, how are you getting that? And you'll be able to start to share with them and have some impact on the organization. Don't go and start pointing the finger at people. Do it yourself and model it, and then see what happens from there.
And it should be noted, that's hard work.
Yeah.
It's very hard work to play the game with the rest of the company that they want to play, which is toxic, and then to turn around and not be that for your people. That is a lot of hard work.
You are so right, Dana, because the easier path is to just go along with the crowd, right? And, that way you as a leader, you catch less heat, less flack from others, right? But when you choose to lead with a service mindset, it's going to be hard. People are going to say, hey, Dana, why are you doing that with your team? Why are you letting your team take the lead on that? We don't do it that way. And you have to let the results, speak for themselves.
Yeah. And I will say, I've had more than one female client who's told me that they do that, and their male boss tells them, you're being weak. You shouldn't lead like that, and there's many different agendas and issues going on there. And it's really hard work.
Yes,
and a lot of the times when they stick with the servant leadership approach, they get the results and they can kind of get people off their back, but it's 3 times harder.
Yes.
Which is sad.
It is.
What other, we'll give people one more minute for questions. But one question I have for you all is, what do you think is the hardest advice, other than what we just talked about? What is the hardest advice to follow in here? And what's your advice for why you should do it anyway?
Wow, that's a nice thought-provoking question, Dana.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that comes to mind, Ken?
Well, I think the hardest advice is the whole concept of different strokes for different folks.
Mhm.
You know, because I think people have favorite leadership styles, and they don't really want to have to use a different style, not only for different folks, but for the same folks on different parts of their job. And that's, oh my God, that sounds really complicated. But the reality is that if you're going to be there for them, if they're an enthusiastic beginner, they need direction. If they're kind of a disillusioned learner, they need coaching. If they're capable and cautious, they need support. If they're self-directed achiever, let them run with the ball, delegate to them. But don't do that. Unfortunately, the most popular leadership style is seagull management, you know, where you give people a responsibility and then something goes wrong and then you fly in, make a lot of noise, dump on everybody and fly out.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up that whole concept of situational leadership. I think it's one of your simple truths, right? It's not just per person, it's per person per moment, because
Right.
you know, one day someone's got everything they need and the next day their whole world fell out from under them and they needed a completely different kind of support. And that is hard.
One of the simple truths that I think is the hardest is the one where we say, those who plan the battle rarely battle the plan. And the truth that we're getting at there is that when leaders implement change, they need to make it an inclusive process, involve others in developing the strategy and the plan. And I think why that's so hard is that as leaders, you know, we've been thinking about the change for weeks, for months, right? We've been working among ourselves, analyzing all the angles and the issues. And then when it gets time to announce the change, we're just of the mindset that, well, everybody should know what I know, right? It should be as clear to everyone else as it is to me, the rationale behind the change. And that's not the case. You know, people are at square one. We're at square 73, right? Down the track. And so really taking that mindset and stepping back and saying, whoa, I need to involve others in this and help me craft the strategy, solicit their ideas, incorporate their ideas. That's really hard because it's time consuming. It's a lot of hard work. It's so much easier just to say, we're going this way, right? Come on, follow me. But as Ken likes to say, if you're leading and no one's following, then really you're just out for a walk, right? You got to bring people along with you. And it starts with getting them involved in creating the change strategy.
And when you do that, which I think can be broadened to servant leadership more generally, when you really do involve people and empower them, they come up with better ideas than you could come up with anyway.
Absolutely.
They see things you can't possibly see. So
That's right.
At the end of the day, you're more effective.
Absolutely. Leveraging the diversity of the crowd, of your team, right? All the different perspectives and life experiences. That's what really brings out the best decisions.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both so much for your time. You've been very generous. I really, really love the book. We'll keep it here on my weekly reflection journaling. And I just want to thank you very much for writing the book and sharing it with us and sharing yourselves with us today.
Thank you, Dana. It's been fun to be with you.
Yeah,
You
real
too.
pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Take care.